We'll call the meeting to order at 5:33. Drew, would you provide our invocation, please?
Sure. Pray with me, please. Father God, we're always grateful for your presence and guidance. Father God, we ask that you give us wisdom to know how to serve our community best. It's in the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
Amen. Shane, you up for another flag salute?
Will you stand
Now
for
we'll
the
do our
flag
flag
salute, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Kevin Keener,
Here?
Drew Jackson,
Here.
Clint Horner,
Here.
Shane Knight,
Here.
Whitney Kerr. Here.
Our first order of business is consent items. And just the way these are structured here, I think we're gonna do 1A and we're gonna do them separately. So, because there's gonna need to be some discussion on our calendar. So consent item 1A, consider approval of regular meeting minutes from June 1, 2021. Do we have a motion for those?
I move to approve.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Call for vote, please, or? Okay. All right, item 1B, discussion, consideration, and possible action on amending the 2021 calendar. And I believe this is just for the time, not changing days or dates.
That's correct. At the last planning commission meeting, it was requested that staff put on the agenda to have essentially switching the times, having regional planning commission starting at 5:30 and planning commission starting at 6. So that's the only changes that was being discussed.
Any discussion on that?
Move to approve as planned.
Motion and a second. Call for a vote, please. We're going to move to item 3A, discussion, consideration, and possible action of PC 2021-15, amending the Chapter 156 regarding subdivision regulations. This is O'Neill.
So this is something that we've been working on for a little while. So we're bringing it back before you with some changes to the ordinance. A lot of it is to do with the approval process of plats. We also added in some language, some clarification points. We also added in some additional requirements for the sidewalks and streetlights to be placed within the plat itself. If you have any questions, be happy to answer them. Tom's still looking at them unless he has his thoughts this evening, but so any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I guess question or comment I had on, I have to get to the page that it's on here. I believe it's on page 22. Let me see here if that's, or maybe 24 on our packet. See if I can find it. Okay, yeah, it's 24 in our packet. And I guess the question I had is, it says the requirement H says location of streetlights. This is talking about on the application procedural requirement on the, I think it's just a preliminary plat. Well, let's see if it goes on to say, it's for the plat. It makes reference to location of streetlights, and then item I says location, dimension, and construction drawings for sidewalks throughout the subdivision.
Okay.
Does that count as saying we require streetlights? And how many do we require? And like who's gonna put them in, and when do they go in? And also for sidewalks is who, I mean, I'm just picturing if a developer comes in, plats it, sells all the lots, and then what mechanism is triggered to force or require whoever now? Is it the lot owner? Is it the, only on developed lots? Is it, so those are the questions kind of going off in my mind of how do we, does this qualify as saying we require streetlights and we require them every 150 feet or whatever the number is? And
Right.
so that's my question on, those two things are my questions on the,
Sure, on the
Ordinance
timing
language.
end of it, I can answer that one. So typically, all your infrastructure is gonna go in prior to the house actually being built usually. Now, the sidewalk obviously would be a little different because you don't necessarily wanna put in a nice new sidewalk and then have big trucks running over the sidewalk and tearing it up. So, we placed it on being just to where it's a plat requirement showing it on the plat. But you're right, that'd be a Tom question as far as if that would actually require the mechanism of, I believe that it would count because it's much like where we require them to certain type of streets and we try, or I would think so, but I'm gonna refer to Tom on his legal thoughts on that. Because we may need some additional language in there and we can definitely do that.
and if it's not an issue, I don't wanna make it one. I just-
Right, exactly, and I'm not 100% sure if it is an issue, but,
Okay.
we can find out for sure. Tom, would you mind?
I mean, ultimately, if it's part of the plat, it's a required element of the lot, but probably not till occupancy. So I think the enforcement would be that before a certificate of occupancy is issued for a particular property, you have to have the sidewalk in place. And it would be, and the lot owner is on notice of that because when they purchase the lot, it's contained within the plat. Now, undeveloped lots, I don't know, maybe there could be some language and we could look at it to say that, within a particular time from when a plat is filed, there has to be sidewalks regardless of whether the lot ends up being developed or not, because otherwise you're just gonna end up with a checkerboard of incompleted sidewalks. So that's certainly some language that might be considered. But on a new plat, I think all you can do is indicate sidewalks, where they should be, and then it's up to the lot owner to put those in as a condition of occupancy. But probably there should be a timeline on from the time a plat is filed until sidewalks have to be installed on all lots. I mean, is that something?
That was just a question I had of, are we gonna have, have fingers pointing, no, it's not mine, it's yours, and it's not.
So this can be negotiated between the contractor and whoever purchased the lot, as far as who puts that in?
I think so. I mean, if you purchase a lot and you don't develop it immediately, I think you're still subject to that timeline from when the plat is approved. So that's,
I kinda like that idea.
that should be really in the plat itself, so that everybody takes it with notice. That if it's a 36-month timeline or a 60-month timeline, whatever a reasonable amount of time is, if I'm a lot owner that doesn't have immediate development plans, I take that lot with notice that I have to put a sidewalk in regardless of whether I build it, plan to sell it, whatever I do.
So, Mr. Markham, is this document the document that people should refer to as far as what is required, or is that gonna be specified somewhere else?
It should be in the plat documents themselves, because and I've had this discussion with city staff and in some other context. my thought is, in a plat, in a final plat, that should be where a property owner can go to get all the information they need about easements, setbacks, and other requirements of that lot, so they don't have to look in 10 different places to get that. So, and maybe in the code, it says from the, you know, from X amount of time, 60 months, 36 months, 48 months, whatever a reasonable amount of time is, from the filing of a plat, you have to have sidewalks. And then there's obviously that final plat date, and everybody's on notice because there is a final plat and there is an ordinance that requires a sidewalk within a certain amount of time.
So the plat would contain the required thickness of the concrete, how often you have
No,
to
that,
wait.
I mean, I don't think the plat probably contains all of that. I think that would probably be something that would be contained elsewhere. But the plat would itself have the sidewalk indications on the plat, just like it has build lines and easements and everything else.
Well, this may, overlap to Mr. Keener's question, but, where is the document or where is the substance that we're gonna communicate to those who are gonna be required to make these improvements?
I actually have a comment along those lines that I think is.
Go ahead.
That my comment was that we probably need to include a minimum requirement for residential sidewalks, that they have to be 4 feet wide and, 4.5 inches thick or whatever that may be. So that there's a minimum standard for that. And then on like the street light side of that, we probably need to define that, a certain number of foot candles on the surface of the street is required, and whether that is something we keep up with or we reference another document, like the Federal Highway Commission's document on street lights or whatever that may be to, because someone sticking up 2 street lights in a neighborhood, technically they might meet the ordinance, but it's inadequate.
Sure.
So if we can maybe put some sort of reference standard in there for sidewalk and streetlights, then I think it would alleviate the questions.
I'm trying to find it, but the city does have a sidewalk ordinance itself. It doesn't say it's required, but it does say, if I remember right, it has something in there about the sizes and things like that.
Ah.
I was gonna try to find it and see if I couldn't locate it. I should have printed it out, but,
Well, then our answer may already be in our ordinances somewhere else, that streetlight, foot candles and sidewalk requirements are.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the key in the plat. As long as you have something to reference,
Right,
rather than
right.
spelling it all out in
Right.
every single
Yeah.
plat, because it could change.
Sure.
And as long as the reference points to an ordinance or standard.
Yeah.
and I don't believe that there's anything in there as far as the streetlights, because that's nothing we really have had before. But there's nothing to say that we couldn't add a little subsection in there, but, and I was getting with Robert today Robert Holiday from OG&E about the preferred distance of streetlights, because that's something that every utility company is different on what their preferred distance is, and they're gonna be the ones handling it, installing it and all that.
Yeah.
So, anyways, but that,
To me, it would make sense to have those things defined and have a reference for people before we make it a requirement.
I'm wondering on the streetlights, if we need to have a requirement of whose responsibility that is to see that gets put in. If it would be on the developer.
I think maybe going to Shane's sort of a reference to a lighting standard gives some flexibility, and then the developer can determine how that's gonna happen. So you could either have big bright street lights every 300 feet, or you can have street lights like in the neighborhood where you used to live, and
Yeah.
I currently live, where you have a smaller light in every yard that provides adequate lighting, but the developer plans for those in the plat, and then if it's made part of the plat and that meets the standard, if it's one like in Prestonwood where you have a lamp in every yard,
then it goes just like a sidewalk where that burden goes to the property owner with the purchase of the lot.
Okay.
But it would have to be set out in the plat, and then if it's not a individual mandate, then it sort of becomes the developer's responsibility, I would think, to do the streetlights.
Or
Because
that, would you think that would, if it was a developer's responsibility in that case, that's something, part of the infrastructure that would need to be in before the final plat is approved?
Just like
Streets and everything else? Okay.
curbs and gutters and.
I was just thinking through that also, depending on where they put them, is it gonna be right in the way of a driveway? I guess it's just, then you pick another lot if they, however they want their house to sit and the drives, and it's gonna be in the middle, so, okay.
So is the question about identifying whose responsibility it is that for recourse if it's not fulfilled, or?
I think he's, the way I'm thinking of it is, if we have the reference, it has to, like Shane's saying and Tom's saying, that it have a reference that you have to have so much, what the foot candles?
Foot
for-
candles or lumens or whatever the designation is.
Yeah, for a section of street, and then it's up to the developer to decide, is it going to be something he's gonna provide or oversee, or gonna be an individual lot owner? That would be in the final plat, whether it would be this light, or, our street lights have so many lumens, and they're gonna be well, they would be on the plat, they would show.
Or I don't know that you would, this isn't my decision, obviously, but that you would allow use of a new street without proper lighting, correct? If street lighting is gonna be a requirement,
That would be my hope.
then, I mean, I would think the lighting would have to go in long before all the homes or properties were developed.
Conceivably, yeah.
Because ideally, you'd have everything in place prior to, especially streetlights. You could get those with streets, now sidewalks obviously would be different. But,
Yeah.
I mean, you'd have to run electric lines to that, and I would imagine you'd want to do
But
that.
that would preclude a scenario like we were discussing where it may be an individual lot owner responsible for
Right.
some of the lighting, but I mean, that'd be a decision for basically you guys and the council on how they wanted to do that, but.
Seems like almost, if you think about progress, it would have to come after construction, not before,
For streetlights,
or sidewalks, any of it.
I can see sidewalks, I think streetlights,
Who
You know-
maintains the streetlights?
I believe OG&E in this
Once
case,
they're-
in.
Once they put up, OG&E will maintain it.
Can I add to this for a second, as I develop two developments? That OG&E is the one that engineers where the streetlights go. You have no say-so in it. They tell you corners, they won't do it in the middle of the
Could
street.
you put your name?
Oh, sorry. But, as I said, like, even new development where you're buying a lot, you just can't, OG&E tells you where all your stuff is gonna go, so.
If you're putting in streetlights to be maintained
Right.
by OG&E.
Yeah,
That's
but-
not, you don't
Correct.
have to do that.
You
But
don't have to do that,
If that's
that's
what a
correct.
developer wants to do, is
But that's
put
the
in
only way to
streetlights
put
that-
streetlights.
It's not the only way, but it is a way.
Well, as I said, like, I developed two developments, and they have to engineer it, because there's no way that you can put a metered pole.
But
in the
that's what,
city.
well, to Tom's point, he's saying if you had a development where each individual lot owner was required to put up a
No, but we're
light.
talking about platted stuff. So when you go plat your new subdivision, then OG&E will plat everything for you. Whether your transmission lines are gonna go, where your pole's gonna go, if it's underground, it's not. And they tell you this is how many pole lights you're gonna have. And it's never in the middle of the streets, always in the corners, because nobody wants to have a pole in the middle of their lot. You know how it shows up. And if we tell people to go in as a developer, hey, give me curbs and gutters or those elevations, this is how you engineer. Scoot up 4 feet and put sidewalks too. So it'd be developers' responsibility as well, just like they do the streets, to go ahead and do the curbs. So if you go build your house and you don't like where just like you have to cut your curb to put your driveway, you cut the sidewalk. Because the elevations should be there before you even do utilities. You don't even do
utilities until your final elevation on your, basically your front yard is done. So your sidewalk is already predetermined. So when you cut your sidewalk, I mean, you cut your driveway, let's just match up the sidewalk in that spot. You already know where you're, I mean, developers should take care of all of it. And I'm a developer, so I don't wanna, screw my fellow developers too, but I think that's usually how it's done in the bigger cities where we're involved in some projects in Denton, Gainesville, that kind of stuff. You put everything that they come in and you slice it and that's however you want to. But you don't have a say so where the lights go. I mean, I know that from a fact with Terabella,
Well,
my development with
but
South Dakota.
Terabella, for example, I'm confident Terabella's not gonna meet whatever lighting standards come up here because there's a light on one end of the block and a light on the other end of the block, and no matter how bright that light is, it's not going to meet those standards. And I understand OG&E may only wanna put poles on the end of each block, but
They engineered it for us at Terabella.
I understand,
so,
but,
yeah.
but we're not
I'm
bound by,
not- I'm
but
not
the
arguing
city
that,
in
just
this,
saying my
and this
experience.
body's not bound by OG&E standards. We can, this body and the city council can say we want whatever lighting standards are there, and then whoever the developer is has to, abide by that regardless of what OG&E standards are. But, I mean, I think Joseph is correct. OG&E will come in there and set standards for the lights that they are maintaining, but that's not the only standard.
Well,
I will say, just from dealing with OG&E, they're super fun about wanting their specific thing and not being real willing to bend to anybody else's, so.
Sure. Which I don't blame them. There's efficiency and uniformity for them.
Yes, I agree. And I agree with what Joseph said too, that a lot of the sidewalk stuff typically is on the side of the developer, and you cut the sidewalk and curb all at the same time, at least in other developments that I've worked in. So that is an ideal way to do it, I think. It does put more burden on the developer, but I think that's an ideal scenario from a municipal standpoint of getting all of your standards put in up front, so that if someone does buy up half a dozen lots on the east side of a neighborhood, we're not absent those sidewalks for 2 years or whatever the
Well, and
requirement
it
may
has
end
a
up being.
uniform sidewalk throughout the development
And it-
rather than a piecemeal.
Yep.
And it
One
does.
person wants this type of sidewalk that meets the minimum standards, but is
Yes.
not
Yeah.
consistent with the rest of them.
The street lighting thing, I just think there needs to be some sort of reference to some particular standard for foot candles. Because residential streets are gonna be different than commercial streets, are gonna be different than highway frontage. So there should be a minimum there, and the minimum may be one in each corner, I don't know, I mean, but there should be something there.
so, yeah, I don't know.
Were you looking for action on this today?
I'm sorry.
Were you looking for action on this today?
Well, it's discussion or consideration or possible action, so it's up to you all how you wanna handle it.
I have probably a dozen more comments on this particular item,
Okay?
and I know it's 6 o'clock, so I don't know if we've got to adjourn and come back, or,
Typically, yes, we do.
And I was asked by somebody listening, outside to make sure that we're having the mics on and speaking into them. So, just putting that out there for everybody.
So do we want to adjourn this or recess this one?
I'm fine continuing, I just don't want to break any rules.
It depends on how we want, if we still have quite a bit that we need to cover. There's only one public hearing item that we'll actually hear. So it's up to you all how we want to do this, and we could,
Well, if we're going to recess the other one and come right back into this one, we're not going to get to that one until this is over anyway, so
right.
it's that.
mind submitting my comments, like tabling this and just submitting all my comments. If we don't have to do them
Right,
right
and that's
here,
fine too.
if that's easier.
To me, again, I've already said this, but to me, it seems logical to have standards in place before we make a requirement of people to abide by them. So I'd like to see what those are.
I would too. I know that, or I think or believe that, I know we've got one that, for whatever reason, we're not hearing a preliminary plat further down the agenda. And once it comes back, I know that, I believe council would like to get street lights and sidewalk requirements in as soon as possible if we can find a way to do that effectively. So however we can work that out.
And for this particular one, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, but even with the one that's already on the agenda that we're not hearing, because they've had their application in prior to an ordinance being in effect, even if the ordinance went into effect, this particular plat would not have to meet those requirements. Am I correct, Tom?
As long as it stays active and moving through the process, if they were to stop and have to reapply, then they would be subject to whatever regulations were in place at that point, but.
And this particular one would have to go back through and go through the whole process all over again. So,
At whatever time they apply to start their process, they're subject to the rules in place at that time.
okay, just wanted some clarification. Thank you.
So any recommendation on how to satisfy the concerns or questions?
I know council's really wanting this done, so we don't have a lot of these subdivisions going in without the streetlights and sidewalks, and I agree with that. If we still have a lot of comments left, trying to think of the best way to handle it, honestly. Cause the plan, for the preliminary plat, they're planning to try to be on the August agenda. So I will say that, that's what their plan is. Now, we don't have that, all their information, so we can't guarantee that they will in fact be on the August agenda. So, until we get that, we don't know if they're gonna be in August or not, but they have until
Are you
Thursday.
talking about for a particular development?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
so, but other than that, I'm not aware of any other preliminary plats that are currently in the process. So, kinda depends on how, if we want to try to get this through before that particular development, or do we want to, cause we can do contingency type things, obviously, or we can kind of put some more work into it and get some of the further comments from you guys and see, and go from there. So it's whichever way. And the mayor's joining us too, if she would like to have an opinion.
I am fine knocking all this out tonight. I have a lot of comments that I don't know that I could recommend approval
Okay,
unless we knew some of these things were gonna get incorporated.
right, and if, with the standards idea of, I know you guys are wanting, like, the standards of it, one thought is to be able to use the NCTCOG standards. So that should be something that we can find online and get on there. So, I mean, there's some of these things we could get in place, obviously, and do, depending on exactly what other issues there are, but if it's mainly the standards type of thing, then that might be something we can get done, as it, and keep it going forward, but.
Whitney, do you have any input on this?
This is probably a legal question. Can you have in your ordinance something to the effect of, meeting XYZ criteria and other adopted, like city adopted requirements, or? Because I'm thinking if 3 months from now you adopt some National Highway Transportation Authority document
Right.
as a guideline for something that goes into here. Does that have to be incorporated into this ordinance, or is that just something else that is adopted that would then fall under the other adopted documents? Or
Right,
I'm
okay,
not-
so within the building code, it has in there saying that, and as adopted by the state each year, or whatever that case may be.
Right,
So if we wanted something, if it was a situation like that, then yeah, we'd have to have some wording in there saying other things as adopted by the state or whatever that,
yeah.
that piece is. But if we wanted to have any other standards put in there within this, then it'd have to be within either this ordinance or another, you know, another part of the ordinances, and that, depending on where that went, that may or may not be something that would be heard by you guys.
Do we have a section on streetlights anywhere else in our ordinances?
Not that
Or
I'm
is
aware of, no.
This is it? Okay.
And I looked at the sidewalk thing, and I didn't, just at a glance, didn't see where it specifically called out size, so I may have been mistaken on that.
That's something, you think we can have the standards by our next meeting, or if we?
For
if they-
planning commission,
Yeah,
yeah, definitely we
they
could.
chose to do that.
If you chose to table it, we could definitely get those standards in. We just may have a,
Is it possible to accept or approve this ordinance tonight and then amend it in 60 days or whatever that may be with this additional requirement?
I believe you can, can't you, Tom?
Sure, I mean, you could always amend it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, if this body could recommend approval of the ordinance, and then the council can approve it, and it's always subject to amendment.
Yeah,
Going to your earlier question, I think the more specific the ordinance can be in referring to external standards,
yes.
the
I
better.
agree. I agree.
I mean, the last thing we want is for anyone for it just not to be clear. And I don't even I think it's fair for it to be clear. I'm not even thinking about people trying to wiggle out. I'm thinking about people trying to comply.
Yeah.
So if it refers to a particular standard, if that standard changes, that's okay. We've just pointed to it. And Danielle's right, we point to the building code, we point to things that periodically change, but at least it's a very good roadmap.
Right, right.
And I think that would be the goal.
I didn't want to make redundant work or an amendment to something a week after we approved it, sort of thing, but I'm just thinking what is presented tonight is already an 80% improvement over what we had, but I'm not sure that we've got all the things in there that make it 100% kind of document.
You know, and if you are, like you'd suggested, some sort of external standard, that's a great way to go, in my opinion, rather than trying to incorporate that standard into our ordinance and then always be playing catch up. If you can refer to that standard that's always going to be a good standard, then no matter how it changes, you've got one single reference to it.
Yeah.
Rather than always, we do that with the traffic code at times, we just adopt the traffic code.
I think similar to like the ODOT requirements that we reference and to,
Sure.
the building code stuff that we reference. Maybe we just find that reference document that coordinates with street lighting, and I don't know where that falls in our conglomerate of ordinances, but if we could adopt that in another 60 days as our standard, then that.
So here's a question, Tom, you can probably answer this too, but one thing that I was thinking of is if we did an approval of this, if you guys agreed with majority of what it is, and then we could sit there and have those standards in there, referring, you know what I mean? We could do that the next time, or whatever that is. Is that something possible to do, or would we want standards in there prior to adoption of the full ordinance? What are your thoughts?
that's up to this body, whether they want to see it in a final form and know exactly what those standards are, or whether they want to recommend the approval by the council of a document as it is, and then amend it as we go. Either way is permissible, it's just up to this body whether they want to see it in more of a final form before they recommend the adoption by the council.
I'm sure you got a thought on this one, I know.
My opinion is it's not ready, needs to be tabled. It sure can be. Just gonna see if there were any other comments since this was the discussion done.
I'd rather see the final version.
Any more discussion?
No, I mean, I do have a lot of comments. I mean, they're not just spelling error comments, I mean, they're legit, I think, they're legitimate, so.
Do they need to be, do we need to have you share those before, if it is tabled, that it looks for a standard or something like that? Does it need to be?
I haven't shared them with anyone, they're just in my notes on the PDF that we were provided.
That's what I'm asking though. Is it something you feel like you need to share before there's a standard before the staff
Oh, no,
looks for a
no,
standard?
I didn't have a specific standard to call out, no, I
Okay.
didn't, yeah. So no, I don't know that it,
Will your comments will affect the final draft?
yes,
Or one other option is we could do make sure we have comments in sooner than later. And that way they can be thrown in there. And then if it's something y'all want to change or whatever, we can. Whatever works.
You want to lay them on us now, or you want to send them?
I am
Later.
totally fine sending them and copying everybody. I don't know if I'm allowed to,
can't
I
do that,
can't do
no.
that, never mind.
Well,
But-
let us have them. Give them to us. Let's hear it.
Okay, I'll do this quickly. Page 5, we talk about, under 156.006, it's the very beginning of the document. We talk about the division of land in items A and B. Do we need to include the union of land in that? And the reason I say that is the replat process that's described later in the document talks about the combination of land, not just the division.
Right.
So do we need to put division or union of land in that description?
Which one? I'm sorry.
I think it's like page 1, or
Is it under the 006? Is that where you're
yes,
still at?
156.006
Okay.
jurisdictions,
Mhm.
items A and B.
Yeah, I mean, we could put in there division or addition or whatever wording that you used is probably fancier than I said.
I'm not gonna go through the spelling and grammar things, I'll just go through the others. In section 156.041, item 2, paragraph 1, 2, 3. Well, it's page 12 of 27 on the PDF. Oh, okay, sorry. No, 156.041. It's page 13 of 28 down there on the bottom where it says page 5 of 28. I'm on 13 of 28. So in that, we have,
Page 20 on our agenda.
does our agenda come as a complete package like that?
Yeah. Not the agenda, the packet. The packet comes
As one single PDF?
as one single, yeah.
I need to figure out how to do that, okay. So it's, the very last paragraph of item 2 there. Sorry, I'm trying to, there's a sentence there that says lots may be sold and building permits obtained after approval of the plat of the city council, after a recommendation of the planning commission and filing of the signed plat. The preliminary plat process may be omitted if the owner enters into a subdivision improvement agreement. But I don't see anywhere in there where we say what that is, what a subdivision improvement agreement is.
And that's probably something that should be taken out, because I've
Okay.
not seen that either, so
Okay.
that's a good catch.
And sorry, I'm trying to find my next one here. There is a note, actually in that same paragraph earlier, sorry, I skipped it. There is a note that says, so, sorry, Byron. Item 156.041, item 2, paragraph 2, says the preliminary plat and the associated engineering plans for the property may be amended during construction with only major changes requiring reapproval. But we don't know what a major change is considered.
Correct. I don't remember if there's anything in here that talks about what exactly
No, it
What a
talks about
major change
major
is.
and minor
subdivisions.
developments and
Okay.
subdivisions, but it doesn't talk about what a major change is.
Okay, we can put in there
And
what,
it may be
like a
as
certain
simple as
percentage, maybe,
something affecting city utilities. I mean, I don't know what
right,
what that is. I'm not sure that we need a list, but
okay. Do you have any recommendations as far as what you'd consider a major change for your?
well, so in the major subdivision definition, it talks about those being considered, any changes that affect city property, so, or utilities, you know, so streets. What does that mean? So, essentially any I'd have to go back and read the definition, but essentially any city-owned property.
Okay.
So if something affects city-owned property or the extension of city-owned property, then it was a major change. If it didn't, or it was a major subdivision, sorry. If it didn't affect any of those, it was considered a minor subdivision. So I wonder if major change and minor change might have a similar definition.
Okay, okay.
That's my layman response. So item,
Shane,
yeah,
it seems like that should be, I mean, just off the cuff, that should be a sort of a capitalized definitional term, major change.
major change.
Yeah, where you've got that reference somewhere where if it changes, I don't know what it could be, but it seems like it should have a separate definition of what a major change is. If it changes water flow, if it changes,
Yeah,
you know,
and we actually don't mention minor change in the document anywhere, so
right.
I don't, yeah.
I mean, that ought to point you to, I agree, that ought to point you somewhere else where you can have, if it's not an enumerated list, at least something that, where that threshold is clearly defined.
Yes.
Of what a major change is, because what's major to me or you may not be major to somebody else, but,
Right.
but it shouldn't be subject to interpretation, I agree.
next one was at, I'm on page 15 of, so there is a, I'm sorry, I'm scrolling up to find the number. Under sketch plat, section 156.042. Item 5. Where it says approval procedure.
Mhm.
It says after review of the sketch plat, the report and pertinent information as it relates to the plat and the exhibits submitted in scheduling the meeting, the planning commission shall recommend approval, conditional approval, or, sorry, hang on. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Item 4, I was reading the wrong one. Item 4, standards for approval. It says no sketch plat shall be approved by the city council for a plat which is intended for development unless it conforms to the comprehensive plan.
Right.
So that, to me, that reads, if it doesn't conform to the comp plan, then it's not going to get approved.
For a sketch plat, yes.
But that may or may not be the case.
Right. The comp plan typically has a lot of other pieces to it other than just land use. So we can use that and kind of see if that plat does conform with that, or even include with the land use if it's, if they're, okay, let's give an example. Say it's zoned, this might be a bad example, but let's say it's zoned as R1, or even R2, and they're wanting to put duplexes in there, but the comp plan says it's gonna be more low density, which is more of the single family homes, that type of thing. Like I said, it's a bad example, but if there's some conflict there, then we can still use that as a tool.
Well, I'm fine with it being in there. It
Right.
just,
Okay.
I don't know. It just says it was not going to be approved unless it conformed.
Right.
But we make those kind of concessions dependent on the development sometimes, so.
Right, yeah. I think it'd be the same type of thing.
My next comment was about some sort of design criteria for foot candles of light on the street, which I think we've talked at length about. The other comment was the minimum required width for sidewalks. Does the city establish a set dimension of 4 feet wide as a minimum, unless approved by council for some alternate reason? Then in the final plat criteria, so we showed, or we added earlier in the document that we were gonna require designation of sidewalks and designation of streetlights in like the preliminary plat and that sort of thing, but we don't have that as a list of requirements in the final plat.
In most plats that you guys will get will have to go through that preliminary plat before it even hits a final plat. The only time that something would have to go through a final plat process would be if the lots are not, it wouldn't be a full subdivision. So it'd be like a lots, I don't wanna say that. So it'd be like a division of land that's unplatted. That's probably about the clearest way I can.
No, I understand.
Okay.
Yeah, I understand that.
Right, so that'd be the only time the final plat would be approved. Now, if you guys want to require, even if they have to go through that process of just essentially doing a subdivision, or doing a division of land into, say, 2 lots instead of 1, from 1 to 2 lots, then that would be something that would go through the final plat process if it's unplatted. If you guys want to require sidewalks and streetlights even for that particular type of project, we can add that in there. But most subdivisions or most plats are gonna have to go through both the preliminary and final plat.
Okay, I think that's fine, as long as it's clear that,
Right.
you know, your final plat's not gonna get approved for a subdivision without street light and sidewalk
Right.
designations
Yeah.
on it.
Yeah, for subdivisions, they will not.
Yes.
That's, yeah.
Last comment. I'm just gonna reference the page, I can't scroll back up that far. I'm on page 22 of 28 of the ordinance. I don't know, Byron. So, on that page, item 4, where one of the requirements is as-built construction plans where applicable. And I'm wondering if we should have the where applicable designation on there.
Okay.
Like, shouldn't the city require as-built plans of a development so that they know where sewer and power and water lines are?
Yeah, very true.
Just as, I don't know if it should
Right.
be a requirement, I'm just,
The only, and this is still in the final plat piece, right? And we still, let me look. 'Cause and like I said, the only thing that we probably would not get,
yes, it is. in the final.
within that would get as-built for is, again, if we're doing a division of land where there's already water, sewer, power and all that, that's already existent. They should at least show the easements on there, but it may not show the as-bills, cause they
Yeah.
may not have them. So that may be where that, I
So the
believe
where,
that's
the where applicable would
Yes.
apply to a new subdivision.
correct, yes.
Okay. I think that's fine, if
Okay.
that's understood by everyone.
Yeah, yeah.
That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Do we have a motion? Or any more discussion?
I move to table till next month's agenda.
We have a motion and a second. Call for a vote, please. Our next, what is it? Yeah, well, I say we just keep on going unless that violates something.
I think they'll be quick.
Okay. Item 4A is, we're taking no action. This is discussion, consideration. It's the case PC 2021-17, preliminary plat request for property near Larkspur Lane and Prairie Crossing. It's got in our packet that it's required that we take no action. Something in the filing process or requirements to file the preliminary plat weren't completed. I'll let you speak to that, Mrs. O'Neill.
Staff discovered an issue with their application after it went out for publication. But because it went out for publication, we had to at least place it on the agenda. But because of the issue, the planning commission cannot hear the item. So they're going to have to fix the issue, and then it'll be reheard at that point, and then republication will be also done at that point as well. So they'll have to go back through the entire process.
Okay. We'll go to item 4B, discussion, consideration, and possible action on PC 2021-18, rezoning request from I-1 Light Industrial District to C3 General Commercial District for property located at 308 Katy Avenue. Mrs. O'Neill.
So this is a rezoning request, asking to go from I-1 to C3. This is gonna be off of it's at 308 Katy Avenue, so it's kind of back behind where the Taco Casa and all that is back there. The owner has some potential commercial development and is requesting to be changed from I-1 to C3. The surrounding areas is mostly industrial and commercial zoning already. I believe just all the property pretty much on the west side there is gonna be all commercial, and then there's some industrial right in line where that's at. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. The applicant is also here if you have any questions for him.
Any questions for Mrs. O'Neill?
It would not be considered spot zoning since that west side is gonna be, is already C3. It's just across the street. It doesn't exactly touch it, but it's right there near it, so it wouldn't be considered, at least in my opinion. The next one down, Byron, is the zoning one. What, yep, right there, where your mouse is at. Yep.
Yeah,
So, yeah, all the property to the west is C3, and then industrial on the other three sides.
So so lots 1 and 2 in that block are really kind of all one building? Are we only asking for lot 2 to be changed?
Correct. I asked, according to the applicant, it was there is a separation there between the buildings where you cannot access the other building. So that was my understanding. So it's technically still two lots. He may have plans for that north lot as well, but he wanted to do this one first.
and the way the actual legal, the part that in our packet that is highlighted is it's actually lot 3 and part of lot 2.
Yes, so that line.
So the little
box is
box is a little too far north, but it's all of 3 and part of 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, the actual overhead picture looks correct, but that zoning piece right there, I don't think it doesn't change anything or make a difference, but.
Yeah.
And 2, and I know in I-1, there's side setbacks, as long as you're not against a residential, it's 0, so, and did you say C3 as well?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, so. Any further questions for Ms. O'Neill? Any questions for Joseph? Any discussion? No, does anybody want to speak in for or against this particular item? Okay. No comments even after the agenda was sent out, or since the agenda has been sent out?
No, staff has not received any comments, questions, or letters on this particular item.
Okay.
I make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Call for a vote, please. Wish you were quick on that one. That one, motion carries. Any new business? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Call for a vote, please.